The elementary school auditorium buzzed with quiet anticipation. Parents, grandparents, and siblings filled the rows, awaiting the start of the annual spring concert. Ben sat in the third row, a bouquet of fresh daisies resting on his lap, a gift for his daughter, Ivy. His heart swelled with pride as he watched her line up with her classmates, ready to perform. Across the aisle, Moran, his wife and Ivy's mother, smiled with a carefully measured composure, a smile that seemed to hide more than it revealed. Beside her, Caleb, Moran's brother, avoided making eye contact with anyone, fidgeting in his seat as though aware of the storm brewing under the surface. The principal stepped to the podium, a hint of tension in his voice, as he announced a special presentation before the concert began. Two men in sharp suits with the emblem of Marine Realty approached the stage, catching the audience off guard. A hush fell over the room as Moran stepped forward, her voice amplified by the microphone. "I am here to announce that I am divorcing Ben," she declared. The words echoed through the auditorium, bouncing off the walls and freezing everyone in place. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ben's hand tightened around the daisies, his expression unreadable. Instead of anger or despair, Ben stood and clapped. It was a slow, deliberate applause, each clap measured, drawing the attention of the audience. He raised a small wireless microphone and a recorder he had discreetly set up earlier. "I want to thank Moran for her presentation," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "But before we proceed, I need to address some serious issues: financial misconduct, suspicious transactions, and a conspiracy that has been hiding in plain sight." Whispers surged through the room, the parents exchanging puzzled looks. Ben's mind raced back to the past weeks of investigation. He had discovered cryptocurrency transfers siphoned into private wallets, transactions that made no sense in the context of their shared finances. He had called Lena Rodriguez, a trusted college friend and cybersecurity expert, who immediately set up monitoring software on the devices they suspected were being used to conceal evidence. Together, they uncovered documents and messages that revealed a coordinated scheme between Moran and Trent, a man connected to her professional and personal life. The recordings were damning. Moran had been fabricating incidents against Ben, using Ivy as a tool to implant negative feelings toward her father. Techniques that should have been therapeutic for children were twisted into manipulation, designed to isolate Ben from his daughter. Even Caleb, her own brother, had been bribed to give false testimony against Ben, a betrayal that cut deeper than any words could describe. Friends and past acquaintances were also targeted, threatened with exposure or humiliation to ensure their silence. As the audience watched, Ben's calm composure remained intact. He had meticulously documented every move, opened secure accounts to protect his assets, and enlisted legal counsel and criminal attorneys to ensure he could respond decisively. Every step Moran and Trent had taken to deceive, manipulate, and profit was countered by evidence ready for court and federal authorities. The auditorium, once filled with anticipation for a spring concert, had become a stage for confrontation, truth, and justice. Ben's quiet determination radiated from him, a stark contrast to Moran's carefully constructed performance. Behind the scenes, Lena tracked financial flows, uncovering crypto mining operations tied to illicit activities, linking Trent to schemes involving fraud, foreclosures, and human exploitation. Each revelation was another piece of the puzzle, another confirmation that Morin's facade of normalcy was a thin veneer over a web of deceit. Ben's mind returned to Ivy, her small hand clutching the bouquet he had brought. She was unaware of the complexity and darkness of the world unfolding around her. But he knew that protecting her innocence and securing her future required exposing the truth. The confrontation that day was just the beginning, an opening act that would unravel decades of lies, manipulation, and betrayal, setting the stage for a reckoning that no one in the room would forget. As the murmurs in the auditorium grew louder, Ben calmly explained that he had evidence of Morin and Trent's coordinated schemes. Lena had traced transactions, uncovering that the money flowing into their accounts wasn't just ordinary business. It was tied to crypto mining operations linked to illegal activities. Trent's empire had been built on deception, mortgage scams, insurance fraud, and exploiting vulnerable families. Over 3 years, he had acquired 47 properties, displaced over 200 people, and funneled millions into secret accounts. Now, Ben held the key to exposing it all. With precise timing, he played the first recording for the audience. In the clip, Trent's voice was unmistakable, discussing the manipulation of Ivy's emotions, creating false narratives of her father being unpredictable and unsafe. The room fell silent. Parents exchanged anxious glances as Ben explained that Morin had documented false incidents, teaching Ivy to mistrust and fear him. Every lie, every carefully staged moment of deception had been caught on tape. Even Caleb had been bribed to testify against Ben in family court. But Ben's meticulous evidence contradicted every false claim. GPS records, bank statements, and private messages revealed the truth. Caleb had been paid by Trent, pressured to lie, and coerced to assist in manipulating Ben's family. Lena's monitoring had caught Morin sending secret instructions to Trent, coordinating false reports to lawyers and school staff. Their plan to control Ivy's narrative was elaborate, but it had a flaw. They underestimated Ben's determination and his network of allies. Ben's voice grew firmer as he addressed the audience. This is not just about financial misconduct. It's about protecting my daughter, about ensuring no one can manipulate her or other children for personal gain. What Morin and Trent have done is unforgivable. He detailed the next steps he had taken: freezing shared accounts, securing evidence in encrypted formats, and contacting a federal law enforcement agency ready to act within minutes. The parents and teachers in the room watched as Ben outlined the extent of the conspiracy. Morin's attempts to control the narrative, using false testimony and threats against anyone who might reveal the truth, had failed. The plan that had seemed so carefully orchestrated began to crumble in real time. Even as Morin tried to interject, Ben presented the evidence with clarity and precision. At that moment, federal agents arrived quietly at the back of the auditorium. Their presence was discreet, but it underscored the severity of the situation. Trent had no idea that the web of lies he had spun was about to unravel. Ben's recording devices captured every move, every conversation, ensuring that when the time came, there would be no way to deny the crimes. Ben turned his attention to Ivy. She looked up at him, unaware of the full magnitude of what was happening, but sensing the seriousness in her father's tone. "Ivy," he said gently, "nothing will ever hurt you again. I promise to protect you." Her small hand squeezed his, a silent affirmation that she trusted him despite the chaos around them. Meanwhile, Morin's composure began to crack. Her carefully planned facade of control was falling apart as the audience witnessed the reality of her actions. The whispers in the room grew louder, and Ben's calm determination highlighted the stark contrast between truth and deceit. What had started as a spring concert now became the first public exposure of years of manipulation, fraud, and abuse. The clock ticked, and Ben knew this was only the beginning. Federal investigations, legal battles, and the unraveling of Trent's criminal empire were about to unfold. But in that moment, in the bright lights of the auditorium, the first victory was clear. The children were safe, and the truth was finally being told. The tension in the auditorium was palpable as Ben continued to expose the depth of Moran and Trent's schemes. He pulled out more recordings, showing how Moran had systematically tried to alienate Ivy from him, teaching the girl to fear her own father. In one audio clip, Moran's voice was harsh and instructive, coaching Ivy to fabricate stories of anger and unpredictability from Ben. Ben's heart ached hearing it, but he knew he had to remain composed. Every moment of composure was another step toward protecting his daughter and bringing justice. Trent, who had been quietly observing from a corner, suddenly realized the magnitude of what Ben had uncovered. The evidence wasn't just circumstantial, it was irrefutable. Encrypted copies of emails, bank statements, and video recordings had been securely stored and duplicated. Ben even revealed how he had discreetly installed surveillance cameras at locations Trent frequented, capturing his illicit meetings and financial exchanges. Trent's usual arrogance wavered into panic. He was seeing firsthand that every step of his empire could be traced and exposed. Meanwhile, Moran's public image began to crumble. The audience, initially shocked by the divorce announcement, now witnessed the betrayal, fraud, and manipulation that had been orchestrated behind closed doors. Teachers, parents, and other students' families murmured among themselves, realizing that Ivy had been caught in a web of lies for months. Moran's attempts to explain herself were weak, inconsistent, and drowned out by the overwhelming evidence Ben presented. Ben then shifted focus to the financial crimes. Lena had traced the flow of money from Moran and Trent's accounts, uncovering offshore accounts and complex crypto transactions linked to illegal activities. Trent had used shell companies to launder money, manipulated mortgage defaults, and engaged in insurance fraud. Ben detailed the scope. 47 properties involved, hundreds of displaced families, and millions siphoned away from innocent people. With calm precision, he presented the trail of evidence that left no room for denial. The federal agents, now fully engaged, began coordinating with Ben. They confirmed that arrest warrants for Trent and subpoenas for Moran's financial records were ready. Ben's meticulous documentation had made the process straightforward. Everything from audio recordings to digital transaction logs was admissible and actionable. The reality sank in for Moran and Trent. Their carefully orchestrated scheme had collapsed completely. Then came the most personal confrontation. Ben asked Ivy to stand beside him. She clutched his hand tightly, nervous but trusting. "Ivy," he said softly, "you are safe. Nothing anyone says or does can change that. You will always be protected." Her small nod was more than reassurance. It was a signal that the manipulation had failed, and she knew who truly cared for her well-being. The auditorium, now fully aware of the truth, reacted with whispers and murmurs, but also with awe. Parents nodded approvingly, teachers exchanged relieved glances, and Ben's allies documented everything. This public display of evidence, though unconventional, had ensured that Moran and Trent could not manipulate anyone further. The consequences were immediate. Moran's professional reputation began to crumble, and Trent's criminal connections were in jeopardy. Even Caleb, who had been complicit in the scheme for money, was exposed. GPS logs, banking data, and testimonies revealed his active involvement in lying against Ben. Lena's software had captured his attempts to manipulate timelines and documents, leaving him with no excuse. He was now facing potential legal consequences alongside Moran and Trent. As the crowd absorbed the revelations, Ben took a moment to step back and breathe. Despite the chaos, the first victory had been won. Ivy was safe. Trent's criminal operations were being dismantled, and Moran's manipulations had been laid bare. The journey wasn't over. There were court cases, federal investigations, and more to come. But for the first time in months, Ben felt a sense of control and moral triumph. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and federal investigations. Moran, stripped of her authority and credibility, faced intense scrutiny. The real estate license she had once wielded with pride was revoked, and her assets were frozen. She could no longer hide behind charm or manipulation. The court and federal agents had seen the full scope of her deceit. Every attempt to negotiate or bargain with Ben failed. He had anticipated her moves and had secured every piece of evidence necessary to ensure accountability. Trent, confronted with the overwhelming documentation of his crimes, realized that no bribe, threat, or charm could save him. The federal agents moved swiftly, arresting him for money laundering, mortgage fraud, and orchestrating illegal activities that endangered dozens of families. His empire crumbled overnight, and the public exposure shattered his reputation permanently. For the first time, he experienced the weight of consequences he had always thought others would bear for him. Ben's meticulous approach didn't just stop at legal victories, it was also about healing. He focused on Ivy, making sure she felt safe and cherished. He built a home that was not only a sanctuary, but also a place where honesty, trust, and love prevailed. He invested in her education and personal development, ensuring that the toxic influence of Moran and Trent would not linger in her life. Every evening he shared stories, helped with schoolwork, and created a bond that no outside manipulation could sever. The courtroom battles over custody were decisive. With the evidence overwhelmingly in his favor, Ben was granted full custody of Ivy. Moran's access was restricted and supervised, her ability to influence or harm Ivy completely curtailed. The judge recognized not only the abuse and deceit, but also Ben's unwavering dedication to his daughter's welfare. It was a vindication of every effort he had made to protect her, and a clear message that manipulation and betrayal would not go unpunished. News outlets covered the story, though Ben remained focused on privacy and healing rather than publicity. Moran's fall from grace became a cautionary tale in the community, a vivid example of how deceit and greed could destroy not just one life, but an entire network of people around it. Trent's sentencing followed, with a substantial prison term, ensuring that his influence over others would be severed. Caleb and Elaine faced their own legal consequences for their complicity. Through all the chaos, Ben found solace in routine and normalcy. He returned to his work, not as a man defeated, but as someone strengthened by adversity. Ivy thrived in school and in life, secure in the knowledge that her father was her protector. The trauma and betrayal of the past became a reference point, a reminder of what vigilance, love, and moral courage could achieve. Ben reflected on the journey often. It had demanded patience, strategy, and an unwavering moral compass. He realized that defending what mattered, his daughter, their safety, and their future, sometimes required stepping into roles he never imagined: investigator, strategist, and protector. And in the end, the satisfaction was profound. Ivy's laughter, her achievements, and her trust were proof that justice, when pursued wisely, could restore life from chaos. As he tucked Ivy into bed one evening, she whispered, "I'm glad you're my dad." Ben smiled, feeling the weight of all that had been lost and the light of all that had been regained. He understood fully that protecting family went beyond confrontation or vengeance. It was about building a life where love, safety, and trust could flourish, no matter the storms that came before. In the aftermath, Morin remained under investigation, her reputation and career in ruins. Trent faced decades behind bars. And Ben? He had reclaimed his life and, most importantly, his daughter. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every meticulous step of his strategy had led to this: a restored family, a safe home, and a future built on integrity and resilience. In the quiet moments, as he watched Ivy sleep, he knew one thing for certain: some battles, though painful, were worth every scar, because they preserved the ones who mattered most.